Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process in discussions between the authors, narrators, producers, and post-production teams that bring them all together, as well as guests who have listened to the audiobooks and have questions for the creative teams. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Hi, I'm Becky Parker Geist. I am the host of the Audiobook Connection podcast, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm also president of Bay Area Independent Publishers Association and the CEO and founder of Pro Audio Voices and Amplify Audiobooks, providing audiobook and podcast production, distribution, and marketing. And I'm excited to have with me today Rory Surtain, author of Saintsville. Rory, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So I know you like to write in the genres that you most enjoy reading, which totally makes sense, and that's paranormal fantasy and sci-fi. I'm curious, do you have any favorites that you've found maybe especially inspiring or have helped you in your writing journey?
A couple in say the more science fantasy side. Definitely Dan Abnett. I believe he's from the UK, but I really enjoyed a lot of his sort of dark science fantasy, futuristic, dystopian type stories. Excellent writer. I feel like he's one of those that's so good, you almost feel like he's showing off. But, that's an inspiring guy in a way because I can see his talent. I don't see that I'll ever get there someday, but I still really much enjoy his books. And then another one, say more on the straight fantasy, urban fantasy side. Jim Butcher with the Dresden Files is sort of one, and that probably more aligns with generally Saintsville. This is my first urban fantasy novel coming out. So it'll be a series as well, and so I do enjoy a lot of his stuff. He's written quite a few and a long series. So,
well, tell us a little bit about your background. When I'm always especially curious about, that point at which authors have started writing. Did you love writing as a kid? Is it something you developed an interest in later? Kind of what's your journey, or where did it start as a writer-author?
It was pretty abrupt. I've been in high tech in lots of different aspects for decades. I'll just say decades, so you can guess how old I am. And about 5 years ago, right before the whole pandemic hit, I had just been completely burned out. I've probably been burned out for a few years, but I just been burned out and decided I'm at a good spot in my life where I can just do something completely different, and I just said, I just turned in my notice to my boss, gave him enough time to figure out what to do without me. And then I just set up my home office and decided I'm going to start writing. And because like you said, I enjoyed reading. And really, there was a big shift there because up at that point, I did enjoy reading a lot. And I the reading point fell off quite a bit. And it was mainly focused on writing. And then at that point, developing my own style as you go. And I feel like if you read, to me personally now, I feel like if I read too much or read something else, I don't want to feel pulled in that particular writer's direction, or I want to be as original as I can and focus on, what is Rory Surtain's style? And it took a book or two, I feel, until I realized, I think I'm starting to find that style and I can now sort of drive with it and go. And that's a big deal, I think, for any authors. Find your style. Right. Yeah. Go with it. And so I do read a lot less now, and I do, because it's either read, and so it's like reading or even television now, things get a lot more disappointing after you've been in it and you've mucked around with it and you've learned a lot and you realize, oh my God, how did I like that? Or how did I like this? Or my wife can't watch a TV show with me anymore now that we're, I'll be citing the next line that's about to come out on the screen, or I'll be like, and she's doing it now too. So that doesn't make any sense, So you start seeing what's good and and there's so much. The cool thing is when you do see an excellent, whether it's a movie, a TV show, or a book, you really, really enjoy it. But you see that there's almost a lot more non-excellent stuff that's out there that gets a bit ruined when you've been in it. But like I said, 5 years ago, I just switched and I said, I'm going to learn something completely different. I want to learn a new skill. I was always pretty good at, English and writing and all that. But it was like, being good at that and being able to write two completely different things, there was definitely a learning by doing. I've learned to write. I've learned to edit my own stuff. I first hired editors to work with me, which is also cool. You work with people and you learn what they're doing, what they're telling you, and you realize, okay, I can look for those same things and do it myself. And I've learned that. Learned about the process. That's a big deal. Everybody has a different process, but what's mine? How does it work? And I continue to hone it and change it as we go. How to write, edit, repeat. It's a big cycle for a writer. You never get anything done right, to me anyway, on the first take. Everything gets rewritten multiple times, looked over multiple times. You're looking for every last little thing to make it better. And even after you get to that publish button, you can come back and look at it and go, golly, who wrote that sentence? That was not me.
Yeah.
I do that a lot too still, but that's also cool. That's part of my process now is as I'm writing and editing, I will set the book aside. If I've gotten to say it's written and I've edited a couple times, I'll set it aside for a couple months. I'll start on the next book. And then I'll come back around when my brain isn't so attached to remembering what I did there and read a little bit more fresh. And then you see things new and it's like, oh, that's really good. Oh, that is not really good. Oh, I can delete that. And it's just a process of,
right.
Getting there.
Yeah, that's so cool. I know exactly what you're talking about, in terms of like watching a movie or something. I have a long career. For sure. I have a long career in theater as well as writing. And you so appreciate when it's great. And I think that becomes the great gift. But man, all the stuff that, can predict so much of what's going to happen, or, I think it's going to go this way and then this is going to play out and here's the way the story's going to go because it's so classic, And then
the one thing I see that still gets me is it's a general thing is there's this, and I feel it's a flaw that I see in any of these things is when there's this totally outlandish random event that ends up driving a change to the whole story, or the outcome of the story just is completely like you won the lottery and everything turned out okay type of thing almost.
Right.
And you'll see that where this is really good and it's all been developed and one scene flows from the last, and then all of a sudden something totally random pops in there and you're just like, why did you do that? What happened there that they had to just, I don't know, why that was part of it. As I write, I try to make everything make sense based on the premise and what's happened and what's going forward. So it all is more seamless as I could get it.
Yeah. Tell us a little more about your process. So we know that so you talked about that setting it aside at a certain point when it feels like it's done, or you feel like you've done as much as you can with it at that point. What else is a part of your process?
One of the things is, everybody gets writer's block at times where you're just like, I'm just not sure how this isn't right, but I don't know how to push it forward. So there is that setting aside. Another thing I'll do at that same point, instead of setting aside, is maybe I'm halfway done with the book, I'll stop and I'll go all the way back to chapter 0 and start editing and start reading it to try to pick back up that emotion and that thread that I know I've got to carry forward. Because sometimes that's the writer's block, is I've lost the thread of where is the main character supposed to be here, what's going on in his mind. And that's a big learning thing, because I think when I first started writing, it was about world building and, crafting these story arcs and make sure they all made sense. But I was losing that emotion that was so key to sort of anchor every scene or, everything. And I've learned more and more to include that. And that was the thread I was really missing. And that's the thing that really helps tie everything together from start to finish. And so that's sort of the thing, is go back and find where I lost one of those things and, pull it through. Yeah. And so that works.
Do you outline the stories in advance so you kind of know what that story arc is going to be when you get started?
In my head, and usually it's not more than the first half. I'm a little bit more, they call that, by the seat of your pants writer, but I do sort of say, okay, I've got to have a real solid premise, a real solid idea of the characters, and then I'm going to let the book write from there. And it works. And I come up with some of the most, I don't say convoluted, fairly, elaborate storylines that all tie together. And by the end, it all fits. But that takes a bit of time. And as you get into it, I think the first book is always the hardest because that's sort of sets your direction, and it gets easier as you go. First chapter, first book is always a disaster that needs lots and lots of work. But as this book progresses, things seem to get a lot easier to write. You know where you're going, and it just flows. So I guess that's it. So it is that seat of the pants thing. I take lots of notes, though. I mean, I have notebooks everywhere that, oh, wait, here's a couple things I know I need to cover in this next scene or down the road, or here's some details about the character I need to slip in somewhere, or this character or that. So I'm always writing notes, but I'm not as organized as I probably should be there. Yeah.
Oh, I don't think there is a should. I think it's really interesting just to hear how different people approach it, though, because some people are like, they have that plan where they just map it all out in advance and then they're writing from there. Others just like, it's just flowing. It's like somehow this story is just coming through me. I don't know how that's working, but
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So
I appreciate to me, I always call it the muse type of thing. There's that inspiration. And there have been some books, my very first series I was writing, I knew I was going to go like 9 books long. And at book 5, I still didn't have an idea how I was going to get from book 5 to the end. And then one scene just popped out of nowhere. And it was like, oh, that solved it for me. And from there, it was just all downhill to the end. But it was so, it was not planned until I wrote the scene. And then I realized what I just written was going to turn me towards the big arc that was going to get me there. So that was really cool when you realized like, so I love the inspiration, that muse-like thing. That's the fun part of being a writer, I feel, is that sort of thing you're letting. My prior life was obviously high tech. It was much more the opposite. It was very much organized planning and reporting and coding and debugging, all of the high tech stuff that you might do from a technical standpoint, and being creative there still, but in a much more rigid way. So
Saintsville, how did that idea come into your head? How did you get started with that story? So did you have the story and then decided, yeah, I'm going to follow that and I'm going to be a writer now? But it sounded more like you were like, I feel done with this part of my life. I want to do this other thing. And
yeah.
So how did that?
Yeah. So Saintsville is the first book in my 3rd series. So in the last 5 years, I've written 2 other series. There's a 9-book series, one that's 8. I think I got to write a 9th just to be complete, right? And then I've started this one because I just decided needed to take a break, switch to something else. So this is book 1 of what'll be a multi-book series. It's, I think the setting in Saintsville is the word that the magical community uses for New Orleans and the area around it. I live on the Gulf Coast. And so it just sort of felt like, hey, this is an area I generally know, and I'll start there. I'm not trying to be a guidebook for New Orleans or the state or whatever, but I still, and so Saintsville just had that bit of a urban, paranormal, magical type feeling to it. And that's part of my thing is, I don't know, it's just a glitch in my brain, but in my books, names tend to have a lot of importance. There's a lot of themes of, say, identity and things. And part of that is the names, like the magical community uses, different names than you might see from the mundane side of things. And they coexist, but not, they don't fully interact. I don't call them the muggles or anything like that. Like some books, it's but the mundane, but the magical folks, they have their own, hidden community amongst them. And they use that word Saintsville, which ties in generally to the Saintsville. And if you look at the word saint, I mean, it's not a religious book by any means, but there's sort of that magical quality inside of all of us is always in the background as a theme, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Because I'm always curious about this as well, would you say that there are any particular issues or themes or anything that you feel that you are addressing in Saintsville?
Probably too many at once. There's a lot. I mean, yeah, just, I think the biggest one, like I sort of mentioned, it's that question of human identity. Not only what does it mean to be human, but, where does one's identity come from? Does it come from the soul? Does it come from their memories? Does it come from their family or friends around them? Does it come from a title that they have? That sort of thing. Is it predestined or not? but sort of a bit of a philosophical bit there, but I don't get into philosophical questions, blatantly. I let it all just sort of trickle out as the book goes. But then there's other themes like healing from trauma, past trauma, and getting beyond it, is how to do that sort of thing where everybody in some way is broken, and so it's that a personal thing, and you sort of figure out, okay, how do I realize, yes, I'm broken, but I can still go and succeed and whatever, go forward with things. And everybody's broken in a different way and have different advantages as well to go with. So there's that theme. There's themes of lost and found family. There's there's quite a few different things you could glom onto in that regard, but it's all mixed in, so it's hard to track. It doesn't get overbearing in that regard when you come into these things, but you see it, with the main characters especially.
Yeah. No, it's a great story. And as you list those out, I can, because I know the story, I can see exactly what you're talking about. And you're not hitting anyone over the head with those things, but it does get you thinking about those different things as you're, listening to the audiobook.
Yeah. And then the general premise sets it all up, almost right from the beginning of the book. It sets that all up as, who is this guy? If you're talking about the main character, you're what everybody's trying. He doesn't even seem to know. Others, want to know. So that's sort of that tension there throughout the book. Is just the, the identity of the main character himself.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's just take a short pause and we'll come right back and talk more about the audiobook specifically. Would you like to earn more from your audiobook sales? If you're an author with an audiobook, you may have noticed that royalties from Audible especially, and other platforms as well, are frankly kinda pathetically low, disappointingly low, and unfairly low considering what it cost you in effort and resources to create it. How is it the retailers are the ones making all the money off your work and investment? As someone who started in the audiobook industry in 1981, I've found it frustrating that authors keep getting shortchanged. The good news is that Pro Audio Voices just launched Amplify Audiobooks, a direct sale audiobook platform for authors that puts you back in the driver's seat. Earn 65% of the gross sales price that you set. Compare that to the percentage of the percentage that retailers give. Run promotions on schedule whenever you want. Create coupon codes. Build community with your customers, since you'll know who they are and how to contact them. Work with a caring, responsive, supportive team to help you succeed all along the way. Get help with marketing. Get paid weekly. We're helping audiobook authors who are frustrated by painfully low royalties and the barriers that prevent them from managing their own products and customers. Amplify Audiobooks is a direct sale platform that enables authors to earn much higher royalties and have way more control. We're disrupting the audiobook industry by putting authors first. Get started today at proaudiovoices.app or go to proaudiovoices.com and click on the Distribution Amplify link. Join the movement. So we had a full cast record your audiobook of Saintsville, and you were clear in our first discussion that was the direction you wanted to go. Yeah. Was this the first time you had an audiobook created?
Yes. And it was just one of those things where I was looking at just like your normal one narrator audiobook type of thing, and it just, to me, felt flat. I mean, because I have, there's a main character that's male, but then there's a really strong side and almost main character that's female, and there's just lots of different ones. And it was just like, there's no way one talent to pull that off. That was just sort of, I've heard, when you hear a book and you hear a guy trying to do a little child girl's voice or something else, or a woman's, it's just like, no, that's just not, that wrecks it for me. So I thought, let's go full bore. Let's try to do this right. Yeah. And see what we can come up with.
Yeah. And it was really, when I first looked at the manuscript, it was in total agreement. Yes, this definitely feels like it, it deserves that full cast in terms of the number of characters and the kinds of kind of diversity of characters, if you will, of the the different kinds of voices and just how much dialogue there is, which is just great in the full cast approach. As you were in the casting process for Saintsville, talk to us a little bit about what that was like for you, listening to the different voices, making those decisions, because, that a lot of our listeners are authors who may be considering having a full cast audiobook but haven't been through the process. So I'd like to give them some idea of what that's like.
What was that like? It was stressful. Number one, because but it was actually, to me, it was actually really good because you're casting, I forget her name, but she was excellent in pulling in, here's 5 or 6 options for a list of main characters. And then it was just sort of listening to those over and over again and trying to get the right feel, in terms of that. And we did a little bit of swapping and juggling because, this person's great here, but they're even better here, but they auditioned for this one, but I think they're better. And so you do a little bit of that. That was all a lot of fun because it's making it all fit together.
Yeah.
And, so that was excellent. And it was actually pretty easy. That took a few days of, me and my wife sort of listening to them and I like this one. And we got some really good voices in there. Yeah. So good
great
talent.
Yeah. And you were able to attend part of one of the recording sessions. Do you remember what that was like and what your thoughts were at the point?
It was cool for sure. I mean, and actually that's the thing that I think emphasizes this isn't an audiobook where you've hired a narrator, because there's a narrator's voice that basically runs. If you have a narrator, it's going to run basically throughout the book. It's going to be a lot more neutral, even if he's trying to match, certain characters. It's going to be a lot more of a neutral feel. Whereas we're talking, to me, it's voice actors is what we're talking about here. These people are interacting in a dialogue. Let's say it's a dramatic. It's called a dramatic reading and a dramatic dialogue. So it's there's much more of a real feel to it.
Yeah. And so is there anything that you would say, so we're still at that point as this is being recorded, we haven't added the sound design as yet, but that is in process. So for what you've, experienced so far, is there anything about the overall production process that stands out to you or was surprising? Anything that you would like to share about that?
Surprising. Not all the voices sounded as good as they did during the initial casting. Let's say we've had some issues back and forth with that, but so that's a bit of work. I'm trying to think what else is from
I know there was, so I'll bring it up. There was an issue where one of our actors actually had a cold, during one of the sessions, which ended up creating challenge and a fair amount of re-recording that had to happen as a result of that. So that is a thing that can happen. And it's, of course, because of the full cast sessions, having multiple actors coming together, when that actor had that situation of having a cold, it would have been better for him to notify us, oh, hey, I've got a cold now and we may need to reschedule. We were, of course, trying to stay on a production, on schedule with what we had planned out. But what I want to highlight there is a couple things. One is that stuff like that can happen, so just for our listeners to be aware of the fact that it's, we're all real people and real stuff happens, right? And then the other is that those things can be fixed. And so even though it may end up taking longer, or it may end up involving considerably more work, but it still can be fixed. So those are the things I wanted to highlight from that.
Yeah, and it goes back to, hey, we've got 14 people on the thing, so you're trying to line up 14 different schedules with 14 different. Everybody's got stuff going on. I'm surprised that there wasn't more than just one that was ill. I think for that. So that's all part of that. You just keep going through it. So
yeah. I noticed on your website also that you have several free ebooks. Is that one of your series?
So that was the very first series I wrote, which is a pure fantasy, distant medieval world, type of thing. And I just decided, hey, let's just make it, free and let people enjoy it. Because that's one of those things. I'm an independent author. I can do what I want. I can price stuff however I want. And I just thought, hey, I really like this series, but I'm just going to make it available. My brother, who is a teacher, he's always asking me, can I get copies of this book for his students to read at school? And first I'm like, are you sure they're old enough? But, not that there's anything gratuitous or anything like that, but still you worry. But then I just said, I'm just going to make that whole thing free and let folks enjoy it or not. And it's sort of cool because I get, I don't know how many, 50, 60 different countries I've had people, accessing it around the world. And I enjoy that. There is a secret tie-in between that far distant series and the current one, Saintsville, and the undercurrent series I'm calling it. There is a hidden one in there. If you read the first series, you might see it. If you didn't, you won't notice it, or not necessarily that it wasn't there. But it's an interesting little thing I threw in there. That's so cool.
I also noticed on your website that you have a series in a serial podcast, Hive Worlds. Would you like to tell us about the podcast that you've got going?
Yeah, I guess you call it's a podcast format. It's basically the first 3 books of my second series that I went and created a multi-voice AI-driven rendition of it, basically. So that was crazy work. And I thought, okay, I'm going to just put these 3 out there for people to enjoy for free. And if they want to listen to it, they can. And it's on the, also I wanted to learn, what are these podcasts? What is RSS? What are all these podcast platforms? And, what are the right sites to use? And it was more of a learning experience for me to go through that process itself. And so, but it turned out cool. And it's actually, if folks want it, it's a free thing. If they're driving to work or whatever, give it a try. If they're into it, it's a science fantasy, dark, dystopian, futuristic sort of universe.
And I think some of what you've talked about in terms of the things that you have, some of your earlier works, making those available. I think it's, we all have those starting times, right? And putting them out there and getting things going. We all have those. So those are great. And then in coming back to Saintsville, so you mentioned that you have, this is the beginning of a series. Anything else you'd like to tell us about the next book, or, when you think that's going to be done?
The next book is pretty much done. I'm actually about halfway through writing book 3, probably a little fine tuning on book 2, but that's minor at this point. I do my own book covers as well. So I've learned a lot around the art and things like that and how to get these sort of to pop. But so book 2 book 2 brings this, it picks up where book 1 left off. That's not giving anything away.
Yeah, that's good. That's good because it's great. Saintsville's great. I love it. Really enjoyed working on it.
And so it picks up where that left off, and it pulls, maybe it's a little darker. I know. I always wonder what you thought of as, because it's dark fantasy. It's a bit gothic, but I don't think it's horrifically dark. There's nothing gratuitous in terms of the horror or anything like that, but there's a mood about it, or a tension throughout that gets pretty dark. So I always wonder your opinion of where you think it lies. Is it, it's not obviously Harry Potter or Disney, but.
No, but I think I would say, in terms of the darkness level, I might equate it with Harry Potter at about that level. Because, there's a lot of really, great relationships in there, and we learn. So I'm very interested in that aspect of different stories, what those relationships are. Mm-hmm. And so, and you've got the darkness, you've got the people who are more on the, I'll say, the evil side, but it's not black and white. There's a lot of different variances of gray, which is, to me, so much more realistic in terms of how we as people are. We're all different shades of gray, right? We have different pockets of darkness and areas of darkness. And so in that way, I really love the how the characters are developed and the way that they interact with each other, and how the story plays out as a result of their relationships and the stuff that they have to navigate through, right? So we have, it's when those characters are put to the test, just like when we as people are put to the test, and we have significant challenges that we have to wrestle through. I remember there's a colleague of mine who talks about, like, you really have to put your screws to the characters to put them under so much pressure that they have to. That's when it gets really interesting, when they're under so much pressure that they have to take action, and what actions do they take? That tells us a lot about who they are, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And the tone, I think it's the action and the tone. I think that was one of the things as we were going through the process. I'm like, okay, the main character guy, he needs to tone it down, because he based on what he's going through, you can react as any human. You can react in all sorts of ways. You can be angry. You can be belligerent. You could be, steadfast. There's all these different sort of, emotions, and picking the right ones at the right times is super important. You can't come off as a bully, or if you're a badass, that's one thing. But playing it to the right audience is important, and keeping that in check, I guess you could say, as well. Yeah, but you're right. It's life. You go through those. Everybody goes through the ups and the downs, and it's the ups. To me, it feel like the ups are the point where I'm probably my worst. Because I don't pay attention. I'm not really trying. But it's when the challenges force you to focus. I think that's when your real self comes through. So
yeah, it's a great way to put that.
Yeah.
So how can our listeners learn more about you and your writing? What's your website?
The website is surtain.net. Easy to remember. Or the easiest one, I feel like, it's just everything goes out onto Amazon. So you can just follow me, click on my author name on Amazon, on any book, and then there's a follow button when you go to the author page on Amazon, or you click on that, and so that's already quite nice, because then anytime I release anything, Amazon will automatically send the email out for whoever you're following, to get that. That makes it a lot easier. I should be doing a lot more self-marketing and things like that. With everything else, I haven't really been that type of author. I'm working on it. I'm getting there. This is like one of my first interviews like this, and I'm enjoying it quite a bit. So I do enjoy working with y'all, and hopefully my thing is, if I get book one done and sort of baked, we can then kick off the book 2 project, because it is, like I said, it's pretty much ready to go there. So yeah, it's fun, but I'm enjoying it. Yeah. It's a good thing to do.
Good.
That's, to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
And we look forward to continuing the journey with you. And let our listeners know that when this podcast goes live, that your audiobook for Saintsville will be available on the Amplify Audiobooks platform. And that is where we encourage people to get it. And also, just as a sneak preview for Amplify, you mentioned the author pages on Amazon, and that is a coming feature on Amplify Audiobooks, as well as some very cool features that will allow listeners and authors and narrators to all be communicating right on the platform and helping each other out. So,
oh, nice. I like that.
Yeah, so that's coming soon, later this year, in fact. All right. Well, Rory Surtain, thank you so much for being with me. Rory is the author of Saintsville.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.